And well, by the time we finish today's deep dive, you are going to see why a tapeworm is actually like a master of profound restraint, and why that quiet forest you hike through is secretly a battlefield governed by these really ruthless, unbreakable mathematical laws.
Yeah.
Today is to translate that dense structural framework into a lens that you can actually use to view the natural world. I mean, if you just walk through the woods, nature looks completely chaotic, just random.
Oh, totally.
Mm.
Bugs flying everywhere, vines growing over each other. It looks like a mess.
Yeah, but underneath that apparent chaos is this highly organized, dynamic system. It's really like a giant engine operating on a very strict set of rules.
And to understand the players in this engine, the
Yeah.
predators, the parasites, the prey, we first have to establish the physical boundaries of their world. So the source material actually divides the environment into two distinct lenses, biotic and abiotic factors.
Okay, so biotic and abiotic. Biotic components are pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, very much so. That basically encompasses everything living. The trees, the fungi, the birds, down to the bacteria.
So the abiotic factors then are the non-living things, the physical and chemical conditions of that space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the text gives us a specific list of these invisible dictators, really. It's the amount of sunlight, the oxygen levels in the air, the temperature, the
And
humidity.
if you're looking at an aquatic environment, you're measuring water conditions like pH levels, salinity, how salty it is, and turbidity,
Turbidity, right.
which is just a fancy way of describing how cloudy or clear the water is.
Yeah, and those abiotic factors are really the absolute foundation of any ecosystem,
Yeah.
because you cannot have a flourishing biological community if the physical foundation just can't support it.
I would like to think about an ecosystem like a really exclusive nightclub.
Okay, a nightclub. I like where this is going.
Yeah, so the abiotic factors are the physical constraints of the building itself, right? It's the square footage of the room, the temperature of the air conditioning, the ventilation system providing oxygen to the dance floor.
Right.
If the room is too hot or there just isn't enough air, it doesn't matter who is inside. They aren't going to survive the night.
That is a perfect analogy because it leads us right into the concepts of um, limiting factors and carrying capacity, which are super central to this entire framework.
Right. So if the abiotic factors are the building, the limiting factor is essentially the bouncer standing at the door.
Exactly. The bouncer's entire job is to look at the physical resources available inside the club, the space, the air, and dictate the carrying capacity.
Which is the maximum sustainable size of a population based on those current conditions.
Right. The bouncer literally stops letting organisms in so the whole system doesn't just crash.
And the really crucial takeaway from the source here is how incredibly sensitive that bouncer is to even microscopic changes, right?
Oh, completely. The carrying capacity is not some static number.
Hmm.
It fluctuates. The source actually notes that scientists actively study these limits using rapid response organisms.
Like brine shrimp, right?
Yes, exactly, brine shrimp,
Mhm.
because they germinate quickly. And if you take a population of brine shrimp and you make just one tiny adjustment to an abiotic factor,
Like making the water just a little bit saltier.
yeah, you slightly increase the water salinity, and the carrying capacity plummets instantly.
But wait, why does a tiny bump in salt matter so much to a shrimp? Like, what is actually happening at the biological level to make the bouncer kick them out?
Well, it all comes down to cellular mechanics, specifically osmosis.
Ah, osmosis, high school biology flashback.
Right. But it's so important here. Brine shrimp cells need a very, very specific balance of water and salt to actually function. If the water around them suddenly becomes much saltier than their internal fluids,
The water inside their cells gets drawn out.
exactly, it's chemically drawn out into the environment to try and equalize the salinity. So their cells literally dehydrate and shrivel up.
Oh, wow. So the abiotic environment changed, the biological machinery failed, and the carrying capacity just dropped.
Yep, one little dial turns, the salinity goes up, the cells shrivel, and the population collapses.
And that's just one species. I mean, think about a whole leak. If you drop the pH of a lake because of, say, acid rain,
The water becomes too acidic.
right, it becomes too acidic for snails to build their calcium shells. So the snails die off, then the fish that eat the snails starve.
And the birds that eat the fish just have to leave.
Exactly. The abiotic building constraints dictate absolutely everything.
Which forces us to look at what happens once you are actually inside the club. The physical stage is set, the bouncer has determined the carrying capacity, but the resources inside are finite.
They aren't unlimited. Organisms have to interact to survive within those very strict limits.
Right. And that interaction is categorized into three core relationships
Mhm.
defined in the text. You've got competition, predation, and symbiosis.
Let's start with competition, because there's a really rigid law in ecology regarding this. The text explicitly states that two species with identical ecological niches cannot coexist in the same habitat.
Yeah, that's the competitive exclusion principle. An
Mhm.
ecological niche is basically an organism's entire resume.
Like their job description.
Exactly. It's what they eat, how they hunt, when they sleep, where they nest. If two different species have the exact same resume, and they're applying for the exact same job in the exact same location,
One of them is getting fired.
well, yeah, one of them will ultimately face local extinction.
So there's absolutely no sharing. Competition always results in a decrease in the population of the species that is slightly less adapted to secure that specific resource.
Right. It's a brutal game of elimination. It is actually the ultimate driving force of evolution.
But competition isn't the only way populations are controlled. Predation is the other major mechanism.
Yes. And this is where people often get confused.
Well, yeah, because the text says predator and prey interactions actually generate stability within an ecosystem. That feels completely counterintuitive.
It does, right?
Yeah, like, wait, a stable ecosystem relies on creatures constantly murdering each other.
I know, it sounds wild. But biological stability has absolutely nothing to do with peace. When biologists use the word stability, they are describing predictable fluctuation.
Okay, predictable fluctuation.
Right. Predation regulates the population and maintains the vital balance between the available resources and those who consume them.
So it's like a seesaw mechanism.
Exactly like a seesaw. And you can actually map it mathematically. If you chart predator and prey density over time, you see this perfect staggering wave.
Let's map it out for a second. Imagine a massive spring rainstorm causes an explosion of plant growth, right?
Okay, lots of rain, lots of plants.
So the rabbit population suddenly has this abundant food source. They breed rapidly. The prey population spikes.
But because there are thousands of extra rabbits just running around the forest, they become incredibly easy targets for the foxes.
Right. The foxes no longer have to expend much energy to hunt. They're just tripping over rabbits.
Exactly. So the foxes thrive and they breed. Now the predator population spikes.
But as the foxes multiply, they start consuming the rabbits at an astonishing rate, which causes the rabbit population to plummet.
And suddenly, the forest is full of hungry foxes with no food. So the fox population starves and decreases.
Leaving the few surviving rabbits free to multiply again because the pressure is off, and the cycle just repeats.
Yep. It's this beautifully violent waltz that keeps either population from completely overwhelming the abiotic carrying capacity we talked about earlier.
That makes a lot of sense. But not all relationships end in one organism being consumed, right? The text dedicates a lot of space to symbiosis.
Yes. Symbiosis is when organisms of two different species live together in direct, prolonged contact. And we see two main variations in the standards: mutualism and parasitism.
So mutualism is the cooperative scenario. Both organisms benefit. They basically form a survival team.
Right. And the text highlights a really fascinating example of this: bacteria living inside the digestive tracts of termites.
Oh, this is wild, because we all know termites eat wood, right? They destroy houses. But the termite itself actually lacks the biological tools to break down the cellulose in that wood.
It's true. Without the bacteria living in its gut, the termite would gorge itself on wood and just starve to death with a full stomach.
It just can't process it.
Exactly. The termite provides the raw material, the chewed up wood, and a safe, warm environment, while the bacteria secrete the specific enzymes needed to turn that wood into usable nutrients.
Neither one survives without the other.
Right, and we see the exact same dynamic underground. Plant roots provide synthetic sugars to fungi, and the fungi act like this massive sponge, breaking down soil nutrients that the plant desperately needs.
Okay, so that's mutualism, but then we flip the coin to parasitism, where one organism, the parasite, benefits at the direct expense of the host.
Yeah, the dark side of symbiosis.
We're talking about internal parasites like tapeworms or heartworms, and external parasites that attach to the surface like aphids on a leaf or fleas on a dog.
Even mistletoe is a parasitic plant. It taps into the vascular system of a tree to steal its water and nutrients.
Okay, but if the parasite is actively stealing from the host, it sort of begs the question, what exactly is the strategy here? Because the source highlights this profound evolutionary truth. A successful parasite does not kill its host.
No, it doesn't.
This is where we get back to the tapeworm being a master of restraint. Think about it. If you are a tapeworm living inside the intestines of a coyote, that coyote is your entire universe.
It's everything. It provides your shelter, your temperature regulation, your transportation.
And an endless buffet of pre-chewed food.
Exactly. So parasitism that results in the rapid death of the host is actually devastating to the parasite's own evolutionary line.
Right. Because if you consume resources so greedily that the coyote dies within a week, you have just destroyed your own universe before you even had the chance to reproduce.
You literally burn your own house down with you inside it.
That's such a bad strategy. So the parasite host lineages that survive over millennia are the ones engaged in this incredibly delicate balancing act.
Right. The parasite must extract exactly enough resources to thrive and reproduce, but leave just enough behind so the host survives long enough to spread the parasite's offspring to a new host.
It's a complete evolutionary tightrope walk. But, if the parasite is trying so hard not to kill the host, what exactly is it extracting that makes this delicate dance worth it? Like, what is driving the termites, the foxes, and the tapeworms to constantly interact?
Well, they're all chasing the same ultimate biological currency, fuel and building materials.
Fuel and building materials. And the method an organism uses to acquire that currency basically defines its entire identity in the ecosystem.
Hmm.
You're categorized as either an autotroph or a heterotroph.
Right. Autotrophs are the self-feeders, the plants, the algae, the phytoplankton. They perform this chemical miracle called photosynthesis.
It really is a miracle. They pull invisible carbon dioxide gas out of the air, absorb liquid water from the ground, and literally use the radiation from the sun to physically fuse those molecules together into solid sugars.
They build their bodies out of thin air and sunlight. It's amazing.
It is. But heterotrophs, on the other hand, completely lack that chemical machinery. All the animals, fungi, and a lot of bacteria fall into this category.
Yeah, we're the heterotrophs. We have to consume the autotrophs or consume other heterotrophs to acquire the molecules we need.
And we need those molecules for two distinct purposes. Food provides both the energy to power our movements and the physical building materials.
The carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids.
Right, the stuff required for cellular growth and repair. But to get to those materials, the body has to perform two very different processes that people actually confuse all the time: digestion and cellular respiration.
This is a huge distinction in the standards. Digestion is purely mechanical and basic chemical breakdown. It's just the process of taking a massive complex food structure, like an apple, and dissolving it into its smallest molecular components so they can be absorbed into the bloodstream.
But cellular respiration is where the real magic happens. It is the chemical reaction where oxygen actually reacts with those tiny carbon-containing sugar molecules to release the energy stored inside them.
And it produces carbon dioxide waste in the process.
So to visualize this for you, let's look at it like stealing a massive pre-built Lego castle.
Oh, I love the Lego analogy.
Right. So digestion is just the act of smashing that castle down into individual usable Lego bricks. That's it. It's just making them small.
Right, just breaking it apart.
But cellular respiration is what you do next. You take some of those individual bricks and physically snap them together to build a new arm or a new skin cell for yourself.
That's the building materials aspect.
Exactly. But to get the energy to do that building, you have to break open the remaining bricks. Imagine those specific Lego bricks are highly pressurized, spring-loaded capsules.
Okay, so bring loaded.
When oxygen interacts with them, you snap the brick open. And that snap releases that explosive, spring-loaded chemical energy, which your body uses as fuel.
That is such a cool way to picture it, because that mechanism leaves the individual, unpressurized plastic fragments, which are the carbon dioxide and water molecules, to be exhaled or excreted.
Ready to be used again by the environment.
Exactly. It perfectly illustrates the reality of cellular life. It's just a constant, unending state of breaking molecular bonds to harvest energy and forging new bonds to create mass.
But wait, if every single heterotroph on the planet is constantly snapping open these spring-loaded Lego bricks for energy, it seems like we would eventually run out of pressure. Like, how does the planet sustain this without running out of materials?
So that brings us to the grand recycling scheme of the ecosystem, which the standards model through food webs and ecological pyramids.
Okay, food webs.
Yeah, these models track trophic levels, which is basically the hierarchy of energy transfer.
So at the base of the pyramid, the first trophic level, you find the producers, right? The autotrophs capturing the sun's energy.
Right, and then the second level holds the primary consumers.
Right.
The herbivores that eat the plants.
And the third level and above are the carnivores that eat the herbivores, all the way up to the apex predators at the very top.
Exactly. But here is the most critical divergence in how ecosystems function. And it's a concept that absolutely governs the limits of life on Earth. We have to separate the flow of energy from the cycling of matter.
Because they obey entirely different laws of physics.
Yes, they do.
Energy operates on a one-way street. The source text explicitly states that the sun is the ultimate origin of almost all food energy. The plants capture that solar radiation and lock it into chemical bonds.
Right. And when a rabbit eats the plant, that energy moves up the chain. When the fox eats the rabbit, it moves up again. But, and this is key, the transfer is incredibly inefficient.
Right. It's governed by what ecologists call the 10% rule. Only a tiny fraction of the energy from one trophic level successfully passes to the next.
Let's actually look at the math because it's staggering. If a patch of grass generates 1,000 units of energy,
Okay, 1,000 units.
the grasshoppers that eat the grass only retain about 100 units.
So that's a huge drop.
It is. And then the mice that eat the grasshoppers only retain 10 units. By the time an owl eats the mouse, it receives just one single unit of the original 1,000.
Wait, where does the other 90% go at every single step?
It's burned up simply keeping the organism alive. That rabbit uses the vast majority of the energy it consumes just to power its heartbeat, to run away from predators, to stay warm in the winter.
Oh, I see. So during all of that cellular respiration we discuss, the chemical energy is transformed into mechanical energy and thermal energy.
Exactly. Thermal energy,
Yeah.
which means heat.
So the rabbit is just constantly radiating body heat out into the cold forest air.
Yep. And that thermal energy dissipates into the atmosphere, and eventually it just bleeds out into the vacuum of space. It is entirely lost to the biological system.
Wow.
So energy flows in one single direction. From the sun into the food web, and out into space is heat.
This is why the biological engine of Earth desperately needs a constant, unending influx of solar energy. If the sun ever stopped shining, the remaining chemical energy would just flow up the pyramid, bleed out as heat, and life would grind to an absolute halt in a matter of weeks.
It really would.
Right.
But while energy is constantly hemorrhaging from the system, matter acts completely differently.
Matter is perfectly conserved.
Yes. The physical atoms that make up the grass, the rabbit, and the fox never actually disappear.
This is where the decomposers become the real heroes of the ecosystem, right? The fungi and the bacteria that break down dead organic material.
Absolutely. They ensure that the nutrient cycle remains a closed loop. When the apex predator eventually dies, the decomposers break down the complex molecules in its body.
Returning the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the carbon back into the soil and the atmosphere.
The text actually notes that the atoms making up the organisms are cycled repeatedly between the living and non-living parts of the ecosystem. The total amount of matter remains constant, even though its form and location change.
It's the ultimate zero-waste system. I mean, the exact same carbon atom locking together the DNA in your cells right now was likely part of a fern millions of years ago and probably part of a dinosaur before that.
It's mind-blowing to think about. Over immense stretches of time, matter is transferred from one organism to another repeatedly. The molecules from food react with oxygen, carbon dioxide is exhaled back to the environment, waste products are broken down by decomposers into the soil.
The plants absorb it all again, and the cycle just continues indefinitely.
Exactly.
You know, understanding this intricate machinery, from the abiotic rules of the environment to the delicate restraint of parasites, all fueled by the one-way flow of sunlight and the endless recycling of ancient atoms, it really changes the way you look at the world. But why does this specific framework matter to you, the listener, on a practical level?
Well, the standards emphasize that the completeness or integrity of an ecosystem's biodiversity is the primary measure of its health. When you realize how tightly woven this web is, you start to understand that disruptions to any physical or biological component send catastrophic ripples through all populations.
Right. And changes in biodiversity directly influence the resources and ecosystem services that humans rely on every single day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We rely on those decomposers for our agriculture. We rely on those autotrophs for our oxygen. We are entirely dependent on the health of the very engine we are analyzing.
Which brings up a final, slightly uncomfortable thought experiment based on the strict laws we just covered.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, we talked about the rigid ecological rule of competition, right? Two species with identical ecological niches cannot coexist in the same habitat. One will always decrease.
The fundamental law of competitive exclusion.
Right. So consider humans as just another organism within this global ecosystem. Throughout history, as human development and technology have advanced, our niche has massively expanded.
Oh, enormously.
We extract the fresh water, we harvest the primary producers, we hunt the apex predators, we occupy the physical land. We've artificially caused our niche to overlap with almost every other species on Earth.
Putting us into direct, unrelenting competition for finite resources on a global scale.
Yeah. And the uncomfortable question is, are we the ultimate competitor? And if two species with overlapping niches cannot coexist, how might our unending expansion ultimately affect the global carrying capacity?
That bouncer at the door.
Exactly, the bouncer at the door, which remember dictates our survival too. It is definitely something to seriously ponder the next time you look out at a seemingly quiet forest. It's not just scenery, it's a delicate machine, and we are heavily pulling the levers.